Hello all, this is Michael Vallejo. This is a video response to Chimamada's TED Talk on the dangers of the single story. Within this TED Talk, the perspective was given that people should have multiple stories before they make up their mind about others. Um, Chimamanda provided an example of a visit to Mexico. Before this visit, she had the assumption that as of Mexicans as immigrants, but upon her arrival on the trip, she realized that they were more than immigrants; that they were happy, fun-loving people who actually enjoyed where they did live. Um, the next point was given of the danger of a single story in that it gives power for one person to be greater than another. And it was also mentioned that one single story sometimes because it becomes a definitive story for people, meaning that if that's their only frame of reference, the one story that they've heard, it then becomes a reality, even though it's probably far from the truth and far from reality. It was also expressed that this single story creates stereotypes, um, and uh, and it doesn't really engage in a all-encompassing perspective of others. So my single story begins kind of when I was young. I grew up in predominantly Caucasian neighborhoods, as I'm sure you've noticed. I am pretty Hispanic, um, and I didn't know that I was different from other students until I was in about the eighth grade or so. And then some things started changing in my life. Um, about that time, I started to associate with kids that rode skateboards. It became a passion of mine, more than a passion. It was something that I did every waking minute of my life. When I wasn't in school, when I was sleeping, I was dreaming about skateboarding. But what skateboarding did for me, it had a lot of positive attributes, but it did um, have some downsides. So the kids that I associated with while I was skateboarding, some of them were troublemakers, some of them got into drugs, some of them wrote graffiti on walls. And because I simply rode a skateboard and hung around these people, just merely for we had the commonality of skateboarding, but because I hung out with them, I was characterized as being the same, kind of a burnout, somebody that doesn't have any ambition, all those characteristics, as I'm sure you've heard. But it was my way to kind of engage with the kids that I grew up around, kids that I was different than, kids that I was realizing um, we grew up in extremely different backgrounds. Well, um, skateboarding kind of uh, wasn't so important to me after I got my driver's license, and then it became cars. I worked several jobs when I was in college. I think I had three jobs at the time, and I saved up every dime I had and bought a very expensive car. Um, a car that I frequently got pulled over in. Um, I remember one night coming home and I was pulled over by a police officer, and he simply asked license, registration, normal stuff, and then he asked if I was lost. It didn't make sense to me, but driving home to this predominantly Caucasian neighborhood in a expensive car must have been probable cause for him. But I think of this as a single story in that he painted a picture of me without actually knowing much of me, working the three jobs and being a college student. Um, and similar situations have also happened throughout my life, but actually most recently, so still skateboarding, still with some of the same friends that I've been skateboarding with since I was very, very young. We like to meet up, I don't know, once a month or so, maybe every 6 weeks, to go skateboarding, kind of relive our youth, still feel like we're kids, and just have a good time. Get out, get some fresh air, get some exercise. Well, on one of our recent trips, we got into a little bit of trouble. Now, granted, we were in a parking lot that had no trespassing sign, but harmless. We were just skateboarding circles, cracking jokes on each other, reliving stories of our past. So the security guard gave us a hard time, and none of us were defiant or acting bad in any way. But he had said that we ought to think of alternatives instead of loitering on his property. Alternatives is getting a job or going to school. I thought this was really ironic, being that most of the people I was with and kids I grew up with, highly educated now, business owners, very successful people. But because we rode the skateboards, still, 25 years later, still the same single story, that because I have a skateboard in my hand, maybe a backwards ball cap and wearing baggy jeans, that they associate us with being, burnouts and dropouts in our life. Um, so I found this activity very, very helpful. And moving forward as a transformational leader, I'm definitely going to challenge myself to understand multiple perspectives and not just see that one story, but to get an all encompassing picture of others. Quite often, I listen to people as if they're the single authority on a single subject, but we all know that that's not true. I definitely want to continue to build my background and knowledge base, and use this as a frame of reference for all the encounters I have as my future as a leader. Thank you guys. Really appreciated all your posts. Watched all the videos and thoroughly enjoyed every single one of them. Look forward to seeing everybody immersion. Take care, guys.